Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the EVE Universe Show's coverage of the CSM 17, this time with Jinx De'Caire. I didn't ask ahead of time. Is that even close?
That's right.
Awesome. All right, so we got Jinx here for their interview for the CSM. Obviously, we're interviewing as many CSM candidates as possible. I will say that Jinx kind of was willing to slot in with very little warning for both of us, so we might need to bear our way through it a little bit, and that's fine. But I get to know Jinx, so I guess we'll begin with, hey man, how you doing?
Doing good. Recovering from a cold this week. Not COVID. I was negative.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, but excited to be here. Campaign season's already crazier than I expected. So.
Well, okay. I guess we'll begin there. Like, what has made you decide to run for the CSM?
So, I've been part of Brave and the Brave Dojo for years, and been helping out in my community, corner of Eve, and CSM has always been that bigger part of the community. And interesting challenge. I've seen Dunk do it, and Kigali and Yukiko years ago. It's a big commitment, and before I couldn't make that, and this year things lined up. I felt like I could do it, and it would be a way for me to go beyond the Brave community and support new players and all players across EVE and try to make this a better game for all of us.
Awesome. So Brave Newbies was created, I believe it was in response to the Battle of Asakai, and is always focused more on making sure that people are enjoying themselves and getting engaged with the game, and kind of looking at it with a new bro eyes, if not new bro experience. And then Brave Dojo has been a very useful component of EVE, both for Brave and in general. They teach people how to play. It's like an EVE Uni kind of environment. And an alumni of one of the people that really did that is CCP Aurora, right? Did you work with her?
Yes, yeah, we've done a lot together.
Excellent, cool. Well, that's good enough. That's good reason by itself. I mean, CCP Aurora is going to be very pivotal from the looks of things in a lot of the changes that are going to be coming up. So, having a baked-in rapport is probably going to be kind of handy. I see you have an ad here. Should I play it?
Sure.
All right, let's just do that real quick.
You like sock puppets, right?
Sure.
Lefty Sock here, reporting live from Brave News Network from our studio in Tita. This just in, Brave's own Jinx De'Caire has announced his candidacy for the Council of Stellar Management, ending months of speculation. Jinx is joining me now for an exclusive interview. Thank you for joining me, Jinx. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you for having me, Lefty. I'm Jinx De'Caire, and I've been running the Brave Dojo, Brave's teaching wing, for the past 5 years. I recently started leading the Brave Newbies Corporation as well. I run the Brave Dojo YouTube, where we've been providing anyone in New Eden with classes and EVE guides.
Thanks, Jinx. What do you hope to accomplish on the CSM?
Well, Lefty, I believe the best content in EVE is made by the players. And I want to work with CCP to give us the tools to do more. With my experience and work in the dojo, I feel I can ensure the veteran and new players are well represented.
Thanks, Jinx. Why this year?
CCP is trying to bring us new content, capture new players, and make money along the way. I feel I can work with them to ensure we're getting the content we want and help them meet their business goals in a way the players can accept.
Jinx, do you want to say anything else to the audience?
I'm looking forward to the campaign and convincing friends and foes to vote for me. Check out my website at jinxforcsm.com and drop by my Discord.
Thanks, Jinx. You know you have my vote. Jinx, do you think we can address that rumor that I'm just a puppet?
No comment, Lefty.
So, not only am I now very glad that I watched that, I am also very glad that I did not give myself any warning ahead of time. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, head of Brave Dojo. You said head of Brave Newbies now?
Yeah, the corporation, so under
okay.
Dunk.
Nice. Okay, yeah, I was about to say but that makes sense. Well, that's a pretty big endorsement by itself. You mentioned like the sock puppet took my job, but why are you running for CSM? Why this year? You said that CCP is doing all this new stuff, especially for new bros, which I agree with. But you want to be there to make sure that we get the content that we want. What is the content that we want?
I think it's getting the tools to have fun, or the toys to have fun in the sandbox. And how have I expressed that is, they talked about doing things like faction warfare and making sure that people are getting into the game and the next steps from the MPE. But I want them to go beyond just how we're interacting with the NPCs or the lore, but give us corporations and groups, alliances, more tools to interact with the sandbox and so that we can create the fun, because I think we're creating all the content that's fun in Eve. And then I want them to build, like when they do things like heraldry, that was actually on my list before they announced it. I think it was on a lot of people's lists, but I want them to do more than just kill marks. I want them to do things like that and reward all kinds of play.
Oh, sorry. My son's here. You get to deal with a small interruption. Hey, great job. High five. Come say hi to everybody.
How old?
He's 8.
I have an 8-year-old as well.
Almost 9.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Ed. Here, take this. All right. Love you. Close the door a little bit. All right. So back to you though. Appreciate you're willing to work with that. So I do like what you were saying, but how does that jive with the living universe idea, right? Like we're CCP is focused, it would seem, more on giving the environment more life, such that better PvE to do, but more importantly, that there is a story to pay attention to. And this is extremely controversial to people, right? Should CCP be providing a story? Should they not? How do you feel about that? In the world in which you think that, or you say that we provide all the interesting content, do you think that is something that CCP should do their own part, or do you think that they should stay out of it?
No, I think the story is part of it. So that's interacting with the part of the community that really enjoys that. I also like that they're removing roadblocks from playing in the sandbox. So we have people come and they want to do faction warfare, and we have to explain, oh, sorry, you can't be in Brave and do faction warfare.
Right.
You could do it on alt. So they're talking about removing those barriers. So that's opening up the sandbox for us, and that's really what I'm looking for is to make sure, try not to gate the content, and then if you're going to build tools if you're going to build these things, make sure that the most people in the game can interact with them. One thing that I saw was very short. They're working on kind of some new quests or missions or dailies. I'm not sure what they called them, but that's something that I've wanted. And if they could let me as a corporation give missions to our new players, I think that's something they're really asking for. They often get to, they join and they say, okay, now what? Whereas if you could just have some very simple things like just go kill some rats, go mine this, go tackle some people, and it's all things that can be pulled. If I had a third party tool, I probably could pull it all out of ESI somehow, and then reward them for that behavior. If I could do that all in game, I think that'd be amazing. And I think they're building these tools, but if they could be a way that we could interact with them too, that'd be really awesome.
Right. So they've talked about a new career system with basically what amounts to, it seems like an achievement system that may or may not unlock certain stuff or provide rewards for completion. Like right now they have the opportunities thing, but it kind of doesn't do anything. Sounds like it's the finishing up that sort of thing. But you're saying that you would like to be able to construct custom made objectives.
And you could see, like right now you might be able to do that with the contract system, but it'd be a pain. So like right now, if I wanted 100 Atrons, I can just go to somebody and they'll build me 100, and that's the easiest way to do it. But if I could just make available to every new player that joins my corporation or yours, that I want them to build me one, and I put up money, and then that opportunity is just open to them, I think that'd be amazing. And that's just like one example of a tool that they could give us to make the sandbox more vibrant.
Yeah, you could use contracts for industry, but what if what you want is a system to ADM5, right? Like you could put out missions and rewards and point your people towards, other kinds of tasks potentially.
Right. I really want you to go kill rats in EC TAC because we need the ADM higher.
Yeah. And somebody comments, Brave Epic Arc win, and I just like, Brave newbies wishes to expand their borders, and no.
Yeah, well, so they said that, and so we've got a roleplay community. We've got people who do fiction. You could see that if they had the tools, it could be very simple, even if it was just little courier missions. But if they could tell a story as part of it, it would be more things to do in space.
Right. I'm of the position that like having a living universe allows us to tell stories because it gives us things to react to, catalysts that our choice for how to interface with it is what matters. Therefore, what's most important is having the ability to make those choices, right? Rather than not having a path at all, having paths that you can choose to walk down or not.
Right, and I think one thing that we see with new players is, you come into the game, the MPEs, very directed, very polished. Then you come off that, and it's kind of a cliff, which they've acknowledged, to the career agents, and then those are still directed, but they're very, very old. And then, depending on where you venture to after that, it can be, it's a blank sandbox, which I love, and I know how to find the content and all that. But I think leading those people just a little bit more, saying, oh, if you do these kinds of things, you can find more fun.
That's a good answer. What? My cat is breaking in. You get all of the distractions today, so I'm at least going to give you points for patience. But okay. Nope, that totally blasted anything I had in my mind. So CCP has said that their focus is going to be on faction warfare and on the empires. Brave Newbies obviously isn't 100% focused on faction warfare. What value do you think that you bring to the table that maybe other candidates don't? That would be the reason why you need to be at that table during the conversations that they're going to be having over the course of the next year.
So for faction warfare,
or just in general, like any of the things that they've talked about.
Okay. But even in general, for faction, for anything they're going to implement, I've been spending years, working within Brave, looking at every change that comes and says, okay, how is this going to affect new players? What do we need to do to support them? Does this help us or does it make it worse? I included like one example that I wasn't the only person to catch this, but when they made the mining changes, they were going to make T1 have the worst waste. So that was, we saw huge drama coming. People were going to want to kick ventures off the R64 moons, the good moons. And so what I did, I went and bought 1,000 Galente mining lasers, because they were storyline that had zero waste. So I bought the entire universe out. So even if they made the change, we would still be able to have our newbies on the R64s. And then they fixed it before it came in, and now I have 1,000 Galente mining lasers. But that's my point, is that, having somebody who more than just saying, yeah, they like new players and they want to do fun things with them. Someone who has got that experience to say, how does this change affect them? How can we get those new players to transition to veteran players?
So just be clear. So you collected up the mining lasers, not necessarily to make a point or to communicate to CCP trying to get the change, but rather just to be prepared for it. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, we were just going to fit 1,000 ventures with them, and then we would survive that change for however long it took for them to realize it was a bad change.
What, in your opinion, is the single most impactful thing that CCP could do or change for new bros and new bro retention?
One thing is always hard.
Right.
I think,
but I mean, like don't try to figure out how to make it practical. Let's say you could dictate an entire cycle,
okay.
But like,
so
what should they do?
I think they need, and I'm stumbling here. I think they really need to extend the MPE throughout, where you're just teaching them small concepts, you're reinforcing it, you're also teaching them how the rest of the game plays. We use so much terminology, and that's in small groups, big groups. We all use so much jargon that if the game could introduce them to that, or I think that would help.
Yeah.
They're slowly, and you saw that like in the new MPE, they had them jam somebody, which is a big change from before. Before you just kind of rolled around and you watch, but now it's saying, okay, that's a big ship. Here's something that you can do against that big ship to give us a second to win. And so just small moments like that, but just adding them up over time, I think could get new players. So it's not the cliff. I know we love the Eve cliff, but that is blocking more people from being in the game.
I like to say, what if Eve was a learnable game through gameplay, right? That you didn't have to rely on people to teach you basic concepts, because the game itself introduced you to things over time through, a longer, not just an MPE, but just, breadcrumbs and tools to draw people in and give people the answers when they go look for it. But what do you say to people that take on the opinion that, I mean, you ran the Brave Dojo. Wouldn't you agree that those kinds of things should be taught by players?
I think there's always going to be more things to be taught by players, but I like when CCP puts us out of a job. Like we used to, in nullsec, we couldn't get skill books, so we used to give out all skill books to every single person who requested for them. We had a whole contract thing. We did hundreds of thousands of hundreds or thousands, not 100,000, of contracts to players, giving them skill books, and then they added the option where you can just buy it, and that's so nice. We actually still do it for people who don't want to spend the ISK, but just adding that convenience just removes so much friction from a silly part of the game that wasn't really adding much fun.
Right. It also creates a bit of a choice there, right? Because there's the difference between, you can spend a little bit more now, or if you can spend for the convenience, or you can spend less, but that money goes to an actual player. So that player's being paid for bringing a real advantage. But yet, at the same time, it's not a blocker for people that may not have access to that. So I think that's a really good example of where that sweet spot is, where having other players makes it better, but it's not like a barrier to entry, as you were saying.
Right, and for smaller groups, that was something we were able to do at scale because we had a lot of volunteers. For smaller groups, if it's just one person, it might be harder to get new players to come join you, because then you're doing all that work yourself to try to support a small group.
Right. Yeah. And often people don't know how much work really goes into things.
Right. So that's kind of when I talk about tools, is if you give corps and alliances more tools, they talked about better taxation. I think all of that helps smaller groups, because the bigger groups can always have enough volunteers to IT a solution, just with the amount of endpoints you have in Eve. But then that becomes a block for other groups to grow themselves, because you can't compete with some of those tools they have.
Yeah. Well, speaking of tools, what do you think about some of the tools that we have been getting recently? Like, for instance, one of the latest ones was the skill planner, which a lot of experienced players have decried it because it's different. But as far as like building things for new players, the ability to build skill plans and put them together and like attach them to specific fits within your save fittings. Have you guys been adopting that? How do you feel about the changes or the efforts that they have done?
So we made, when they did the corp, we immediately made, or personal, I'm sorry, they'd only give you 10, so I immediately complained about that. So I had skill plans on all my characters. I had 10 skill plans. We had channels that we then used to link all the skill plans to share them to everybody within Brave.
Right.
And then every time they tweaked those, it was resetting all of them, and so we had to recreate them and relink them in the channel. So those bumps weren't nice, but now we got corp skill plans, and we at least got 100, so we're taking advantage of those. I'd still like to see Alliance. I put a Reddit post up where, just like you can save a fit for personal or save a fit for corporation, I just want them to do that for the skill plan.
Oh yeah.
So that was my ooey suggestion.
I think what we ended up doing is, I'm pretty sure it's in the fitting. Yeah, the fitting can have a description, and the skill plan can have a description, so you can link the other in each of those, which I thought was pretty cool.
Right. And so I like it. Maybe the part where they're saying they're going to get rid of the skill queue, I think the bitter vet part of me is like, wait, no, you can't get rid of the skill queue. So I'll have to see how they implement that. I don't think that. I think it can help people stay focused on what they want with the skill plans. But we'll have to see how they implement it.
I do find it really odd that you would implement skill plans if you were also just going to get rid of skill queues, right? Like I get how it can be useful, or like make milestones or whatever, but like if your SP is training to unallocated, like you could just be told at the time. I don't know. That is pretty interesting and whatever.
And so if they do that, what I want to see is they need to make it perfectly clear. So if now I'm only using skill plans to get into things, they need to make it perfectly clear how many skill points I need to complete something.
Right. That has always been a pain.
Right. And so, there you can find it, but it's a pain. And so it needs to be there, like, oh, I want to fly this Condor, this Tech 2 fitted Condor, and I need 1.5 million skill points. It needs to be really big.
You can piece it together. You can't, but like you have to look at each individual one and like do the math, because there's nothing that'll calculate it for you. It'll do it by time, but not by skill points.
Right.
Yeah, that is a very annoying one. Dang it! I keep on driving the thing, and then like it. All right. Oh, right. So it seems like you've got a lot going on. You do a lot already. How are you going to add being on the CSM on everything that you already do without impacting one or the other in a negative way?
Well, I put a lot of energy in this hobby, so I'll have to just do some of that. But we'll have to get Brave, and people in the dojo are gonna have to step up behind me and pick up some slack, because I'm going to be serving the wider community.
Good answer. So, but also, as we mentioned earlier, C-Spear Aurora is a critical dev. You obviously are, you guys are in communication. So why?
We've had beers.
Why do you need to be on the CSM?
So that's one dev, and there's many different teams. And a lot of them are focused on new players this year, as they announced. So if just talking to one and not being a part of the wider conversations, it's hard to catch all those small things that could affect new players. And of course, I'm also going to look out for other players. But if you don't have somebody who's really just used to looking with that lens in mind, and there's these conversations, then you might get to those places where people are gated out, or something like the mining change, which, I wasn't in the room with CSM. I don't know if they brought that up in advance.
Right. Yeah, you have inroads, but obviously you've got more to say to more people than just the one, which makes sense. So what area of space or what activities, like, you teach people how to play Eve? Are you a null sec focused person? Are you a faction warfare focused person? What aspects of the game would I come to you as an expert, besides just like I teach people?
So the things that I've probably done the most in the game are nullsec, the booster or drug manufacturing, T3 manufacturing, gas huffing. But then I also like to explore different things and esoteric things. I've got some videos that I shared in the post. Like I found a Jedi huffing video from years ago from a Russian, back when the Damage Control 2 was an active module, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is how you can avoid all those scary rats and wormholes and get the best wormhole gas there is, and you just go so fast that they can't shoot you. So I went out and I recreated that, and I shared it with the whole community. So I think what that demonstrates is that I'm willing to learn different things, try different things, and share it wider with the community. And I can use those same skills when we're in topics that I'm not familiar with to dive in with the lens that I'm used to be able to go and teach people or point out problems.
Nice. All right. Well, so you're clearly well known and well respected amongst your little group. Although I would argue that I would say that your name doesn't necessarily spread like more broadly, right? If somebody just mentioned you in some random chat, they might be like, who? So what is, you've accomplished a lot, you've done a lot. What do you think is your most proudest like thing that you've accomplished or been part of in Eve that you think that people should know about you?
Probably my favorite individual accomplishment, I have the video too, is when I was on the Alliance Open tournament, and Fraternity brought an Atana, and I flew a Griffin and jammed it out, and their whole team got wiped because they didn't have the Atana. That highlights on there CCP Swift, but at least before he was CCP Swift, he calls it. So that's probably my favorite moment in Eve. But in terms of what I've done is...
Oh, hold on.
Running towards this Griffin just to shove him off the field.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we can watch that.
Wildcard Atana has got the most rep that you can get on any ship in the game, remote rep that is, and it can't do anything. It's permanently jammed here. This is another cycle where it will not get a rep off. This broadsword is down. Fraternity are crumbling. This brave Griffin is finally tackled and going down, belonging to Jinx, but too little too late, where they traded a single Griffin for 2 Sleipnirs and 2 broadswords. Oh my god.
Yeah, this MTU just almost got alpha straight through, and the next broadsword, I don't think I've ever seen our broadsword die that fast.
That was pretty good. That is pretty good. I ain't gonna lie. So for those of you who don't know, the Atana is an AT ship. And of the AT ships, it's one of those ones that has like a really strong use, which is that it is a black ops or is a covert ops capable ship or logistics ship, right? So it's a full on like a basilisk, right? But it can do a covert ops cloak, therefore it can take covert ops sinos. So these are like incredibly valuable and powerful logistics ships, and you managed to undermine one at the AT, or not the AT, but the
Open. It was the year that there wasn't
Alliance Open. That's really cool. That's a good. That's a great answer.
So that's a great individual. On the bigger scale, it's being a part of the Brave Dojo and seeing people go from day one, handing them a Griffin. Some of them have become FCs. They've ended up all over the game. Sharing it all our guides to the wider community. Our guides are not usually as polished as some of the people out there, but we have on YouTube that I help run. We help. We cover all kinds of subjects all over the place, and some like my T3 manufacturing video is probably one of the only ones out there.
Yeah, I just pulled it up.
I think we have two on the dojo, and one is more PowerPoint, mine is more practical. But this one was featured on Eve Academy, so that's a nice thing too.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's so incredibly important. Like, even though I say that Eve is a learnable game, or should be a learnable game, that doesn't preclude the fact that there needs to be people willing to teach advanced concepts, right? Like, knowing how to spiral might be something that shouldn't have to be taught by a player. It should be introduced as a concept. But knowing which ships are best for it, or knowing, some other techniques, like being able to cut them off, how to deal with slingshotting or whatever. Like, these are all things that could be taught by players, right? And so having a person like Jinx on the CSM, especially right now, where CCP, and I know for a fact that CCP are still feeling out what should or shouldn't be taught in the new player experience. And so I think that Jinx can bring to the table not only the kind of problems that new players run into as they learn, and therefore kind of help identify what CCP could address, but also kind of represents that after training, right? The secondary education system, and the need for organizations and groups like Brave Dojo and how to better support them, so to that end, I think that's a reason why you'd be super valuable on the CSM. I know that's not a question, so I'll transition to a question. But like, so as far as activities go, let's talk about, I think somebody mentioned, I want to say your name came up in another interview, almost in passing, that you would be a good person to cover HiSec. Is that, do you agree with that?
So one of the other things that I've done, I'm not doing as well right now, but so actually with Aurora, we set up Brave Empire when they got rid of the war deck the war deck mechanic, where if you had no structures, you could be war deck free. We set up Brave Empire, which was the HiSec equivalent of Brave Newbies, and we really got into how all those things work, taking advantage of the content, and it's been a nice marriage within the Brave Collective and Brave United, which is the HiSec Alliance, of keeping people in that community. But I've got to learn a ton of things. Also with HiSec, I did all the abandoned structure stuff. I have my plan there, just because I put a bunch of effort into it. But we looted like 400 bill when they added abandoned structures, and I planned all that out with an alpha army and stuff like that. So,
nice.
So I do have experience there. I'm not full-time HiSec, but I help run that corporation in Brave as well.
So you made this document, huh?
Yes, yeah.
So CCP, one of the CCP's biggest problems has always been communication. So somebody who's able to take what information needs to be made or like take the raw information and turn it into a presentation, that is an incredibly valuable skill, and that's what I see here.
I'm not a graphic artist though, which shows.
Well, I mean, there's a practical flavor to it. I think this is a really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, so you can see I'm teaching all the nullsecers about safety, and we figured out how to loot. And so there's like a lot of people that complain about some of the looting mechanics in HiSec, and then how some of the war deckers take that advantage of that. So I'm familiar with all of those things too.
Right. Okay, so let's move our way down. Low sec, faction warfare.
Low sec, I actually really like what they did with like the low sec anomalies for mining. I do wish there was. I wish there was enough ore in all space for new players to be able to like go build their first cruiser, things like that. But I do think low sec is great for like having that the best ore, the crocite, the ochre, having those where now we're up in pure blind and we go in there, we bridge in there, we exploit the resources and try to get out before anyone big comes and notices us. So I think that's good to get more people in low sec. In faction warfare, like I said, as soon as they take that restriction off of us, I know there's a ton of people who want to go try that out.
And I would say if EVE Online, like, I think it's safe to say that EVE Online is going through a relatively tumultuous time, at least within the player base. And I think that it's perfectly fair to say that nullsec have been both the center of the rage and been the ones with the most cause for it, in my opinion. You know, while scarcity impacted everybody, it wasn't equally. Like the nullsec was probably impacted the most, and they really haven't gotten much, you know, during invasions and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that really happened was metaliminal storms. Most events focus on low sec. The crab beacons is insufficient and low sec. They've been hit by DBMs. They've been hit by new raiders. They've been hit by filaments. What needs to happen to stop the bleeding out through our gaping wound of nullsec?
So for nullsec, there's a lot of opinions out there with sovs and citadels, but I think to me it's getting people in space, and so I think a lot of people talked about this, but just even giving us back the asteroid belts, you know, don't put enough. We're not trying to recreate Rorqual error. I think everyone sees the issues with that and the issues with the ship, but just give us enough. I think if there's enough asteroids out there, so people can just build some basic stuff, there'll be more people in space. Give us some tools, like I said, for us to make nullsec more vibrant. If you let us interact with players with some kind of mission tool, that would be amazing. That might be a big ask, but I think getting more people in space and not we've gotten I'll steal dunks here. We've gotten a lot of stick, and we need some carrot now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be just ISK. It needs to be things to do.
Right. Let's talk about some of those changes. Obviously the gate rat change was almost like an accident, right? Like they removed the ore, then they removed the belts, but with removing the belts means that you don't have officer spawns anymore. And they fixed this by putting the rats on the gates, which is always kind of, I guess, amused me in the fact that one of the most impactful changes to have happened in the last year, in reality, like the day-to-day, moment-to-moment gameplay, is basically amounted to a stopgap maneuver to fix a totally different problem. How do you feel about the gate rats? Do they add immersion at all?
Well, one thing they do that was necessary was you needed them to grind ADMs. So if you were in a system that you just flipped and had no military index, the rats have to exist in space, otherwise it's impossible to upgrade the system. So they had to give us some rats back, and that's how they did it. I don't think they bothered me quite as much. I think I did get tackled and lose something when it first got introduced and got blapped by a dread one time. But I think they should just get moved back to asteroid belts just because it was such a kludge. Like it was never meant to be that. It was, when you used to undock and there was 50 asteroid belts and you're bouncing between the belts, it's a bigger solar system. And now all of that's gone. And I want there to be more in space to do, not less.
That's a solid point. And the other thing about having lots of belts means that it's more places to poke at, more places to be in. An invader has more potential target locations that they have to filter through in order to get stuff. It really does help the cat and mouse games to have that, more texture in that sort of sense. So how do you feel about the DBS and the other thing, reserve bank and main bank?
So DBS,
ESS. That's
in Brave space, we're usually the most violent place. So we've got nice DBS and making a lot of ISK in Q5 if you can dodge the people hunting us. But on the low end, you can see what it's doing is so that they wanted it. I think it was proposed as almost like a crop farming thing where, okay, you have your space, but if you need to let things lay for a little bit.
yeah, crop
to,
rotation. Yeah,
right,
totally.
crop rotation. But there is no crop rotation because once you farm, it's dead. And so I think if it was, I see people saying I think it should return to 100 easier. If 100's not the floor, then it just needs to naturally decay up to 100 much faster. Because so then you could live in a smaller amount of space. I mean, you're seeing the mega coalitions, which I don't count Brave as, the mega coalitions grabbing more space because their DBSs are at 60. So I think if you don't just bring it up to 100, so it's not so painful, then you need to let it return much faster. In terms of
solid. Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, go on. ESS.
ESS, I think we're getting good fights. I think the main bank. I think the main bank is okay. We're getting fights out of it. When it gets big, we start getting our ships out, getting ready to fight because we know people are coming. But the reserve bank, I think, like everyone else said, the ISK is adding up like too fast in there. So they need to figure out some way to do that. I've thought maybe that could become something like passive income and give people a reason to fight over space. I think there's a big fear of that giving more ISK back to the big coalitions. So probably that idea needs to be fleshed out. But the other ideas you hear are just more keys, more time. Right now, if you get a key, then you can sell it, and then the people tend to drain it themselves. Right. And I think you want, maybe there could be keys that you could get smaller chunks of out of it faster, so then it's they don't have so much time to respond. Or if you can stay there longer, you get more money. I think the reserve bank, the ISK numbers in there are already ridiculous. I think it's 50 trillion, and it's just going to keep getting bigger unless they change something.
Right. But is there a problem with that? Like, would you want a reserve bank that doesn't have ISK and therefore has no reward for anybody to utilize? Well,
it's a fixed amount.
Right. But that's my point. Like, it doesn't matter if there's 50 trillion or 1 trillion, as long as there's more than the fixed amount.
But then you're saying, so like in 5 years, they never change it. So in 5 years, there's 250 trillion that all you can ever get out is 1.5 bill. Mm-hmm. And I think then you're basically deleting ISK and lying that there's all this ISK that you can steal.
Right. I guess my position would be like, in the same sort of vein, why even have that system then? Why not just have it be there's ISK there, right? Like if everything's going to be so far above that it's effectively undrainable, then why even have it drain anything at all? Why have it generate anything at all?
Right. Like once it hits, I don't know the number, but once it hits, you could have a cap, and it wouldn't, no more goes in there. And that's effectively the situation we have now. And so if that's really ISK that we can have, then make it a way for us to get it.
Right. The limiting factor seems to be, as you pointed out, the keys. And one of the reasons why is because the keys are one of the hardest sites that take some of the most expensive subcapitals and, I think it's only subcapitals, and must be done in low sec and takes 3 of them to do safely. All of that is required in order to get a single key. And you have to find the sites too. You don't get to just, make them wherever you want. You have to locate them. They're scanned down signatures. So the keys are incredibly challenging. They are, top end content. The receiving of the keys, the using of the keys almost seems less so. You said that, increase the number of keys. How would you go about that? Would you make the site easier? Would you make different kinds of sites? How would you recommend making keys more available, given the fact that its availability is based on how well the site can be ran?
I think you could depending on how much development time you want to spend on it. But you could make easier things, that are equivalent to less ISK, so that it doesn't have to be. Maybe they're only a system notification, and it's less ISK for the reserve bank, and you get it's easier to farm, and you get 200 mil out. And then you could have Constellation one instead of just gating it at the region for the large amounts with the very difficult sites. I think is too high a bar, and that's what we're seeing.
One of the problems, you said that most people drain their own reserve banks, and I think that one of the reasons why we see that is because a reserve bank notifies the entire region. So it kind of seems impractical to attempt to do a legitimate reserve bank heist, and get away with it.
I mean, we've seen it. I mean, what you do is you form up. I think Spectre Fleet has formed up. We've done this too. I'm not picking on them, but they formed up 100 people, and then you go in there with the 15 or 45 minute, and you try to hold it. And if you, depending on what time zone you do that, and where target you pick, having 100 people can be hard to outform because you have that advanced knowledge that you're going to do.
Well, it can be done, but if the goal is to make it so that most of the keys aren't just drained by the Empire, I guess is it okay for it to be the way that Empire groups can get some because first of all, it's worth noting that the main bank takes a percent, right, of the amount. The reserve bank is generated more or less out of nowhere, right? Like the main bank is expected to pay out to the person. The reserve bank was in a way never the ratters to begin with, right? It's just a number that goes up as people rat, more or less. So I do like the idea of it being used in passive income. So is that actually a good idea? That is that the way it should be, where empires buy the keys and pull out the reserve banks?
So I think I didn't tie that directly. I mean, it could be. When I was thinking passive income, I was trying to think of the pos moons of old. And
you mentioned earlier the reserve bank could pay out to as a part of passive income. That's
so that could be the reward for holding space.
Right.
Is and I would maybe you could tie that to the iHub or TCU, but
a certain amount of it decays out to the alliance.
Yeah, it could also just be keys that drop that in your space so that you can get a little easier than other people.
I really like that idea. Yeah. What do you say about all of these functions, ESS, DBS, ADM, all these nullsec systems rely on people engaging in ratting. However, some of the newer content is either not in nullsec or in the Abyss, which doesn't count for ADMs and stuff. I fear that the fact that those other activities don't benefit the collective is a pressure for people to maybe not discourage, but certainly not encourage some of those activities. Do you feel like this is a problem that needs to be addressed, or no?
I think, I mean, they already talked about this, but I think Corp and Alliance taxation tools on all kinds of activities, and they've talked about LP. I think that does benefit groups, and I think people want to debate on taxation as theft, but there's going to be some groups that want to be really high tax because they all want to work together on big things, and there's going to be people that are really low tax. So I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I think if they gave us the tools, big organizations are already doing this. They're doing it with ESI. They're doing it with we've got a Moon tool that calculates how much you mined off the ledger, and then we compare that to JITA and send you a bill. CCP could implement that, and then you don't have to have a whole IT team to run that. So I do think that groups of any size need more tools to run their organizations, and that helps us make content.
Yeah, I think that the idea was that's why they allowed you to put a tax on refining, because the expectation would be that people would go in and just reprocess within the structure, and since you own the structure, you get to decide. You take the taxes out there. But given the number of people that bring this up, it leads me to believe that that's not working to do that. Or at least it's not being implemented that way.
Right. like the just not really the purpose of this interview, but yeah, for R64, you can only. It's a very valuable moon. You're spending a lot of alliance resources to hold those, so a lot of those are taxed higher. So you want the granularity to be able to tax some things high and then other things low. Otherwise, people are just going to go other places to reprocess their goods. Whereas the reprocess tax is just has no levers. It's just one value and that's it.
That's fair. I guess I don't know. I'm not an old block guy, so I always just speculated, but I figured that like now that all of the structures are player owned, you kind of like sure, I guess you could move out the ore to reprocess it in a different area of space if you really want to get around the tax, but then you're probably going to be spending more in moving it, right? But again, I mean obviously it is not sufficient or there's something wrong with it that would need to be looked at in order for people to actually implement it as a method of getting those kinds of rewards. But more importantly, like I said, specifically, like let's look at the Abyss, right? The Abyss is an incredible place for players to learn how to play the game. You want Eve to be a learnable game. The Abyss is probably one of the closest things that we got to it because you learn through practical exercise in a lot of ways. However, it does absolutely nothing to contribute to the actual organization and its ADMs and security of the systems. Do you think that that's a problem? Should Abyss impact ADMs or anything along those lines?
I don't think they have to be related systems. There should be lots of things to do in space, anywhere in Eve, and I don't want to gate people out or think it has to affect nullsec just because they're doing it.
No, I'm not saying it has to. But what I'm saying is that like, if I'm in a system, if I'm in my nullsec system, if I run Abyss, it doesn't help my ADM. Therefore, it's better for me to rat because that will also help the ADM.
Yeah. I guess one thing that you could do to state that a different way is give people, so people in chat are saying, give suspect timers to do it in high sec, make their rewards for doing it in places outside of high sec. And, so if you do it in your wormhole or low sec, then it affects your system in a certain way, or you get more rewards because you're taking risk. The fact that there's no difference between ISK and risk between if I pop that in high sec or in null sec. Within the Abyss, there's no difference. And then outside the Abyss, I'm taking huge risks doing it in null sec or wormhole.
Right. Well, there's different kinds of risks for sure. But that wasn't really what I was talking about. What I'm talking about is the other side of things, right? So as an institution, I want my people to rat because that's how I get taxes and that's how I get ADMs. So why would I encourage people to do the Abyss, even if the Abyss is technically like a higher quality content than just like, brainless ratting, right? Do you see that as a...
Yeah. So I guess that would be kind of when I'm saying more tools is if I wanted your support from as an organization, if I wanted you to support me more, then I could find a way to either tax that red loot, somehow tax the red loot, or do something like a mission related to that where I say, okay, well, why don't you sell that to me? And at least I give you that opportunity to contribute to the organization that way. But I wouldn't make that. I think more tools for groups to make money that aren't relied on third-party tools is key. I don't know how to solve the abyssal one.
No, it's fair. I'm more bringing this up so that way we can chew on something that is kind of a cursed problem because, just to see how you work through things,
Yeah.
But okay, so of course the most important question, what is your stance on cat ears?
So I'm an immortal god in a spaceship, and I don't care about their grimdark. I want to wear my cat ears. and I want them on my spaceship.
There you go.
And if you don't like them, then you can shoot me in the face.
That's my position, right? Like, if you don't want cat ears in the universe, then you got to take them out, just like everything else, right? You want something to be a certain way, you got to be willing to put in the work to make it happen.
So cat girls have 4 ears because they need human ears to tuck their hair behind.
Well, now you've officially thought about this more than I have, I think. DBS. All right. I had one more thought, but now I can't think of it. So I'm going to start by saying you have 10 minutes.
Oh, I have 10 minutes?
Yeah, like we're now at the U phase of this. So is there anything that we haven't gotten into that you wanted to address or maybe circle back on?
I mean, no, this is it's been great. I guess what I really want to get across is, I really like this hobby. I want to see it healthy. I was part of Brave when it first started, and that was the peak population of Eve, and seeing all that craziness. I'd love for us to have just more people in space and get back there. And if there's something that I could do for the community on the CSM to get more people into the game and to bring people back and keep people engaged, then that's what I want to do. I feel like I could do that on part of the CSM. I think the candidates this year are really strong, and so it's really about putting together the right skill mix on the CSM. So it's not all one view. You can't just have all FCs. You can't have all rage candidates. You can't it can't have all industrial guys.
We can, but it wouldn't be very useful, right?
Right. So what I'm hoping is showing that I do have a different take than some of the other candidates, and hoping that I can convince some people to vote for me. They can drop by my Discord. It's on jinxforcsm.com. You can link it off there. I think it's also on my post.
Yeah, and one of the things is that like we are seeing a kind of a turnover in the Eve population. Even if CCP nails all of this stuff that they're doing, they really are transforming Eve and the kind of players that are going to be into it, or at the very, very least, attract new players more effectively. So, it's already true that a large percentage of the population is relatively young, right? At any given time. People don't think about this because, of course, you have to have been a little bit long in the tooth before you can start being like publicly visible. But the vast majority of the population are new bros. And if CCP are successful in all of this, that is only going to become more true. And so somebody like Jinx being able to be there, I think, is absolutely critical to bridge the gap. Like, it's good that we got CCP Aurora on that side, but it's absolutely critical to have somebody on our side that can help be that bridge of the gap. And I think that Jinx really is poised well to be that bridge. I do have a question, though. Is prosperity over? Or sorry, are we in the age of prosperity? Is scarcity over?
No.
What would it take for you to believe that scarcity was over and we are in the age of prosperity?
Step one is to get some asteroid belts back so that a new player, wherever they are, can undock and make a ship. I think in high sec they did at least make the change so that you can build a cruiser down with just high sec materials. But in all the other places in space, in wormholes, now you can't even make a ship just from going into an asteroid belt.
Actually, I think you still need to dip a little bit into low sec for the isogen.
So in the lowest ones, they cut them down to just tritanium, pyrite, and Exelon because of the changes.
Yeah. Well, some of them, like the Logi frigate, does take isogen. I know that.
Oh, it does. Oh.
Yeah. It's actually really funny because in the career agents,
they should change that.
Well, it's funny because in the career agents they make you make one of them, but in the mission right before that, they have you mine kernite. So they give you the stuff that you need in order to build it, but they don't actually tell you that these things are related. So a lot of people will finish the first mission, sell it or ignore it, and then see what they need for the next mission, and then go run off into low sec and try to mine some rocks for isogen when they're not even done with the career agents yet. It's a bit complicated.
Yeah. So I think, I think that like one of the stories that I tell when I first started in Rahadalan with Brave, we jumped into a wormhole. We mined some Arcanor. There was a bunch of newbies and ventures. We were so psyched. Arcanor was the best ore, kind of like finding ochre
Right.
now.
ABC ores back then.
And we were so psyched. Then somebody brought a hauler in because we were getting so much. It popped, the wormhole closed. We had we had to get scanned out by Norman, who later became a Brave legend on his own right. We got scanned out. We were 20 jumps from home, and when we died to a gang camp. It's one of my favorite stories. It's one of the things that brought me back to Eve after some AFK time from my son. And it's a little frustrating to me that like now like those anomalies don't exist. That story can't even happen. Maybe that's a little bit nostalgia on my part, but I think it's hard to say it's prosperity when you've removed some of these little candies that you could find all over the universe and said, no, this only exists here. This only exists here, and they shall not cross. That's frustrating to me that you can't. Very low levels of the game that you can't interact with.
I think that you could argue that the need to facilitate trade is important, and therefore having no one place have all of the keys that they need, and need to bring in something from somewhere else and need to sell their stuff to the other people is, part of the CCP's new paradigm.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting that's a mistake.
Well, at scale, I agree with that. And actually, someone who mentioned gas huffing. So for drugs, or for the gases you need for capitals now, the microsericin and the cytosericin, those are regional based, and you do have to trade. Now they let you compress them, which helps that too. And I think for high end content, that's amazing. In fact, having hotspots like gas cytosericin has, it gives you kind of a reason to hold that space versus other space. But it's not. That's kind of higher level of gameplay, where if you're going to build a capital ship, knowing how to trade across the universe, I feel like is an appropriate step of complexity. Mm. If you're in nullsec and you're brand new and you get handed a venture and you want to build something, and someone says, "Oh, well, for titanium you need to kill rats and reprocess their loot." One, just from a immersion standpoint, that's killing me, and two, it's just incredibly frustrating. If they just gave the asteroid belts back, it doesn't have to be that much ore. No one's going to put Hulk fleets, or maybe they will, I don't know. But it doesn't have to be so much that you could even build a capital with that much ore. You're still going to want to trade with high sec. You're still going to want the isogen from from low sec. But if you gave enough where you could build a battleship, that might be nice.
Right. So,
So I guess what I'm saying is at the low levels, it's still pretty barren, and for the cap producers, they were importing ore anyway.
Right.
It didn't really affect their lifestyle.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it doesn't matter if they increase the amount, if they double all the ore, because they reduce so much down to zero or low. Like if they reduce it by 90% and then double it, they've still reduced it by 80%. If they reduce it to zero and then, if they remove the belt and then double all ores in the belt, well, they haven't given you anything. Right. This isn't just but you said belts. It isn't just a belt thing. Like this could be solved through anomalies or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You took away ore anomalies in wormholes. You took away, like, were the Jaspit anomalies in high sec that people used to chase around. There used to be one per region, I think. They used to chase those around. Was that really what was breaking the game? I don't think so.
I like the idea.
So to me, they still need to back off a little bit.
It's also not a terrible way to reintroduce officers, because if a rare officer becomes a rare spawn to those sites, then that actually kind of makes a little bit more sense than dreads on gates. So yeah, but like, is that it? Is it the availability of different materials in different areas of space that makes it not scarcity, or not prosperity? It's scarcity. Or to put it a different way, if CCP refuses to do that, Isogen goes in low sec, Tritanium's in high sec, Mercoxic in null sec, and never shall the 2 meet or 3 meet, whatever, without trade. If they're going to go with that, like, does that just mean that scarcity never ends in your opinion? Is there another way that it could go about, or is it really just like things aren't going to be fixed until people can build based on what they farmed off the land?
I don't think it has to be. Not every space needs to be able to do everything, and at scale. Like I said, I think it's awesome. The Ochre noms have been fun content and things like that in LowSec. I think that should remain. I just think that there's just so many. It was such a blunt instrument to remove things that we need our vibrant living universe back, and you need to heal that wound a little bit.
I agree that like reintroducing it just very rarely, right? So all areas of space may have all of the different resources. It's just at what percentage,
right? Like when the Athenors had basic moon ore, and you could get Arcanor in any kind of space,
right?
That was probably a mistake. And you could get Spotted Mane in any kind of space. That was a mistake. I won't say probably. That was a mistake. So they fixed that, but they did so much at the same time, and they need to, for it not to be scarcity, they need to back off. Prosperity, I guess we were in prosperity, and so you need to show us why it is, if you're going to call it that.
Very cool. All right. So final thoughts. Anything at all?
No, I love to talk about Eve. I'm very accessible, so I hope you guys will stop by and hit me up.
Yeah. How is the best way to like get a hold of you if people want to ask you questions or get involved?
I'm great on my Eve mail, but my Discord is new Discord. But join my Discord, and I got just signed up for Twitter, but I'm not a big Twitter guy, and I've got my Eve mail on my email on my website as well.
I actually want to bring Methos's question here. So would you be concerned if you give Null everything they need, just to put it crudely, wouldn't that really hurt the high sec population? Like, the fact that nullsec needs these things from high sec is what makes those things be valuable to the high secers. If they can get their own tritanium, why would they buy the high secers? And therefore that ore plummets in value, and the desire to work in those areas and learn and the feel good that some of the earliest players have is reduced. Do you see that as a potential problem?
I think people are always looking to export to get the most ISK. So I think the economy does fix that. But I just do want to be clear that I've orca mined in high sec too. We've got a whole we've got a whole portion of that mines the R4 and the high sec ore. So I want those guys to be healthy too. And what I'm saying is, if you give nullsec enough of the ore so the individuals can build a few ships, that would take us out of scarcity, as opposed to telling someone new that you have to go mine rats for their loot to get tritanium it's just crazy.
So here's an interesting thought. If you have everything available, but just in different ratios, right? So you can get Isogen and Hisec, but there's only a little bit, and they're only in like rare spawns or whatever. So you have to really hunt for it, but you can if you need to, right? Or maybe rocks that give very small amounts of Isogen, right? What ends up happening, or what could happen, is that in attempts to get everything you need, you actually get an excess of whatever that area of space is designed to produce. So it's not just about driving the demand, it's about driving the supply. Now you have too much of certain things and need to sell them rather than, trying to just like balance your books, as it were.
Right. Yeah. So then you make it less valuable to keep it where you are, and then you encourage trade. Talking about gas huffing. So when we lived in Catch, for Lime Cytoceracin, this was when it was just a drug. We could, because the sites respawn so quickly in that hotspot constellation, which is how gas works. You could huff more than Jita's demand in a week with just a few players if you tried.
Right.
And so then if that's your apple farm, you now have 1 billion apples, but no one wants to buy apples,
right?
Because they don't taste very good. So you have to just trickle them out or not farm that many. So that was always I used to, because I'd produce the drugs, I would buy it, and then when a player was like, "Oh, this is good ISK income," I have to start telling them like, "Okay, well if you start producing, or if you start huffing more, I'm going to start paying less," and then eventually I'd have to say like, "Okay, I have enough."
Yeah.
I now have months and months worth.
And you have a lot of newbie experience. So this is why I'm kind of interested in walking through this whole problem with you, because so the way I would think about it is most people take their next step through some sort of context. Not most, but there are definitely some people that take their steps through context, right? So the reason why they're mining in low sec is because they want to build this ship that needs Isogen, and they realize that they need to get it from low sec, so they're going to go to low sec to go get it, right? It entices them to try a different activity, to do a different activity. Whereas, like, if you have the excess amount, then you are actually, another way of putting it, not only is that making it so that there's every resource available, so you could theoretically make things if you needed to, but the excess of the other stuff that you make is its own consideration, right? Now you need to think about, what else can I do with this stuff? I have it, and that leads you towards trade and market, right? Like, if you need Isogen, there's nothing that necessarily like encourages you to go to the market over just mining it yourself, outside of ease or laziness. But like, to a new player that's ambitious, they're just going to do it they're going to do it themselves, because that's the whole point. But if you give them an excess of something, now the correct move is to interact with the market.
Right.
What is your thoughts on that? I guess because yeah. Do you think that would work out?
I think we need economic incentives to do things in Eve, just like that. Yeah. So if you have way too much titanium, we want you to trade it. In PI, this is talked about a lot, about reducing. We want more PI in the system, but it's such a pain to haul. So maybe those sizes need to come down.
Right.
So you need to make that. If trade across space is the goal, then it needs to be less friction between the space.
Yeah. Although I will say that there are things that are bulky and there are things that are valuable, and those are usually not the same things. And I think that there's a purpose for both, right? Like titanium, the problem with titanium isn't its cost, right? Like it's just the sheer amount you need, and therefore the sheer volume that you need, right? You can have all the titanium that you want, but you'll move everything else in one pass, and then your titanium will take like 4 more trips. Like that's the difference in the ratio. Yeah, once again, I guess any closing thoughts? I know we keep on coming back to this, but keep on thinking of more things to dig into.
I think there's just so much within Eve that's interesting and always more for me to learn. So definitely not an expert in all areas, but I love digging into it. I love talking to people and helping new people find new things to do in the game. And I really want CCP to give us the tools to do more and not just a new site, not just a new crab beacon, but give us more in the sandbox to have fun.
Right. And I really, really like that, because rather than just saying that CCP needs to create conflict drivers or CCP, whatever, it's like the idea that it's like, no, give us tools to make things. Like, that's the problem. That's the missing piece, right? That if players are going to be the content, then you need to have the capabilities of making content. If we're going to have, what was it? CCP Soundwave back in the day used to talk about shovels and boots, right? Their job is to build shovels and boots, shovels to build bigger sandcastles and boots to kick them over. And I feel like we've probably gotten a lot more boots than shovels recently. And it might be worth looking at, if you want us to build castles, to focus on giving us those shovels. And to that end, I think that is, as I said, I think that's a fair enough reason why you should be on the CSM, not just for your own viewpoint in it, but I think that just the message it would send to everyone for you to be elected, right? That would be a very resounding, I guess, advocacy for that position. And you kind of look at it from an angle that often I don't hear as much from a lot of the people that think that scarcity isn't over, for example. So I appreciate the nuance you bring and the knowledge that you bring.
All right.
But I think that should just about wrap it up. So for those of you watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you got questions for them, post it down below. There will be links. Send me, Jinx, any links that you want me to drop down there, including his Discord if you want to go ask them questions. If you're watching this on the playlist, then the next one will start up. But otherwise, I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and on behalf of myself and Jinx here, thank you guys for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in space.